In Act 1 of Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare, Olivia figures out pretty quickly that she wants to pursue a romantic relationship with Cesario, and though she will take an active role in this pursuit, she also lets go and trusts fate. She knows that she can't control everything, so she asks fate to show thy force. Ourselves we do not owe. What is decreed must be, and be this so. Ourselves we do not owe. Only fate and time will decide whether or not her desire will become a reality. In Act 2, Viola recognizes she's in a crazy love knot where she's in love with Orsino, Orsino's in love with Olivia, and Olivia is in love with her performance of Cesario. Witnessing how complex this situation is, she says, "O time, thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie." She recognizes her own limitations and cedes control of her love to time. Only fate and time will be able to untie this particular knot. And by the time we get to Act 5, these characters will be rewarded for submitting themselves to fate and time, but not in the ways that they'd expect. Throughout this series of videos, I have noted time and again how appearances have been disconnected from reality. Act 5 will finally bridge that gap. Bring appearances back in line with reality, stabilize identities that have been unstable for the entire play. Today, we're going to put this at the center of our discussion. And if this sounds like it's your sort of thing, please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos. With that out of the way, let's go through Act 5 of Twelfth Night by DiGangi. At the start of this play, Orsino is a sad guy in his house. Through the first 4 acts of this play, Orsino does not leave his house or his sadness. His character hardly develops during that time, but shortly after the start of Act 5, he is at the gate of Olivia's house. There he banters with Feste, who confusingly claims that he's better for his enemies than he is for his friends. Feste explains with his usual wordplay that since his enemies deal with him plainly and do not flatter him, he learns more from them than from his friends. So therefore, he improves because of his enemies. He's better for his foes. But clever wordplay is never just clever wordplay in Shakespeare. Feste is teaching Orsino something. Having spent the entire play in his own house, having only dealt with his servants and Viola dressed as Cesario, Orsino has lacked honest feedback and therefore has lacked self-knowledge. He thinks he's in love with Olivia, but we've all witnessed his romantic tension with Cesario, the only person who has given him any pushback in the play. Orsino enjoys this lesson so much that he gives Feste a coin, which Feste negotiates to 2 coins, and we might be reminded of something here that Feste said the last time that these two spoke back in Act 2. "Truly, sir, and pleasure will be paid one time or another. Pleasure always comes at a cost, though we may need to wait to see what that cost will be." Keep that in mind as we move through this scene. Shortly after this exchange, some officers enter with Antonio, and this sets off a chaotic scene of mistaken identity. But before we dig into the details of that chaos, let's pause on the exchange between Orsino, the self-described lover, and Antonio, the soldier and alleged saltwater thief. As soon as Orsino sees Antonio, he starts spewing a whole bunch of masculine belligerence. "The face of his I do remember well, yet when I saw it last, it was besmeared as black as Vulcan in the smoke of war. Notable pirate, thou saltwater thief, what foolish boldness brought thee to their mercies, whom thou, in terms so bloody and so dear, has made thine enemies?" And in doing so, Orsino, the lover, ends up sounding a whole lot like a warrior. And Antonio shakes off these names, looks at Viola, who is dressed as a boy resembling Sebastian, the man who Antonio loves, and he says, "His life I gave him, and did thereto add my love without retention or restraint, all for his in dedication. For his sake did I expose myself, pure for his love." And in doing so, the warrior Antonio ends up sounding a whole lot like a lover. Time and consequence have changed these two, once again exposing the fluid nature of identity and the ways language and categories always prove insufficient or inadequate to the task of describing a human being. In time, the lover can become violent and the warrior can become tender. And speaking of fluid identities, in that exchange, Antonio believes Viola, dressed as a boy, to be Sebastian. Shortly after Antonio misidentifies Viola, Olivia enters the room and correctly identifies Cesario. The problem is that she believes she's married to Cesario even though she was actually betrothed to Sebastian. The layers of confusion have built up here. Olivia correctly interprets Cesario as Cesario, but Cesario wasn't with her on the altar, and also Cesario doesn't exist. He's a, construct. This is a crazy scene. At this point, Viola drops the performance and confesses her love to Orsino, who believes Viola to be his friend and servant Cesario. So even though Viola has dropped the act, none of the identities can actually become fixed until Sebastian enters the scene. When he shows up as himself, a person whose appearance actually matches his identity, all the other identities in the play become stable. Olivia understands that she exchanged promises of love with Sebastian. Antonio sees that he gave his love and money to Sebastian, but it was Viola who he defended in the street fight. Cesario is revealed to be Viola in disguise, Sebastian's twin sister, a woman, and this allows Orsino to admit that he's been in love with Cesario the whole time. Sir Andrew can give up on pursuing Olivia, and Sir Toby can settle down and become a husband to Maria. An interesting quirk during this final scene is that Orsino calls Viola a boy after he knows her true identity. "Boy," he says, "thou hast said to me 1,000 times, thou never shouldest love woman like to me. Give me thy hand." Orsino admits that he fell in love with the performance of a male friendship. The best wife in Twelfth Night turns out to be a really good male friend. But I'll talk more about that in a future video. So we have Olivia betrothed to Sebastian and Orsino betrothed to Viola. In other words, Orsino is going to become Olivia's brother-in-law. You may recall that in the first scene of this play, Orsino voices his ambition to replace Olivia's brother in her debt of love as she mourns the loss of that brother. Orsino wanted to replace her brother, and it seems as though Orsino got what he wanted, but definitely not in the way that he thought he'd get it. He actually became Olivia's brother. So, similar to Olivia, who submits herself to fate, and Viola, who allows time to untie the knot, Orsino does get what he wants. He just had to stop trying to pursue it himself and let time take care of it. There are some things only time can solve, and anyone who thinks that they can solve the riddles of love or identity on their own, they're going to struggle. And so this play seems like it will be a happy ending, filled with marriages and forgiveness. But then Malvolio's dark presence enters the scene. Fabian goes on to admit the fun that they all had at Malvolio's expense, and then Feste further explains his part as Sir Topaz, and reminds Malvolio that way back in Act 1, Malvolio called Feste a barren rascal. Feste says that the Whirligig of Time brings in his revenges, and Malvolio responds, "I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you." Given the logic of this play, we might ask ourselves whether or not he'd be more successful if he said, "Time will bring revenge to the whole pack of you." The last time that he tried to control his own fate, he ended up in yellow stockings, cross-gartered, smiling like an idiot. But still, we need to take that threat seriously. As Feste said, pleasure will be paid one time or another, and those scheming characters certainly had their pleasure with Malvolio. We could say that Malvolio has actually already paid the price for everybody else's pleasure as a scapegoat in that dark room, or we can assume that time will indeed bring a suitable punishment to the pranksters. Like many things in this play, we will never know what happens to Malvolio. We will never know what happened to Antonio. We will never know if these marriages turn out happy. This play had two major plot lines: Viola's love knot with Orsino and Olivia, and Malvolio's attempt to prevent the excesses and abuses of Sir Toby while elevating his own social status in the process. That first plotline bends towards comedy, or as Orsino put it, a golden time. The second bends towards revenge tragedy. In the first plotline, people submit themselves to fate and time and let the blind waves and surges knock them about as they realize their own limitations. In the second plotline, Malvolio attempts to assert control and authority over his own life and the behaviors of others. He believes in his own interpretations of social etiquette, of found letters and symbols. He tries to control time by establishing and enforcing the proper times for singing and dancing. And as a consequence of this ambition, he's punished for it and vows revenge on the whole world that has treated him so poorly. So, as usual, we are left to ask, is this a comedy or a tragedy? And once again, we should return to the title of the play, It's Whatever We Will. The play closes with a song from Feste. The song traces the life of a man's changing roles through life. Each verse ends with the statement, "The rain, it raineth every day," except for the last verse. That line says that the play is done and we strive to please you every day. It lifts us out of the fantasy world of Illyria and back into our seats at the theater. The singer playing Feste here admits that the people on stage have tried to do something with their time. They've tried to please us, and they will continue to try that every day in spite of the rain, in spite of the fate or the uncontrollable or the uninterpretable. They will aspire to joy, and I have aspired to help you find something interesting in this play. I hope that you've liked this deep dive into Twelfth Night. I will have a couple more videos about this play published soon. The next one will focus specifically on the wise fool in Shakespeare with an emphasis on Feste, and another video will explore Antonio's relationship with Sebastian and the concept of male friendship in Shakespeare's England. If that all sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing to be notified when they're published, and thank you for watching this one.